Morning. We're holding now Daf Yud Amud Aleph. I should say really Daf Tes Amud Beis, the last line. V'hu Yachal Leishias Yisrael. Just before we start, a few important announcements. Number one, the weekly raffle will be in Meseches Sota Monday night, tomorrow night. In order to qualify for the raffle, it's not working. In order to qualify for the raffle, you have to fill out the Google form, and based on how many blocks you learn is how many tickets you will receive in the raffle. Number two is, in Meseches Sota starting tonight at 8:15, we're going to have the nightly shir in the daf, and Meseches Sota will continue to be matzliach. Okay, we're holding now, like I said, Tes Amud Beis, the last line. So we're discussing now Shimshon's parents. They were being told that they're going to have a child, and this child, you should not make sure he's a Nazir, and he should not have any wine, or he should not have any razor on himself. And then the pasuk says, "V'hu yachel es Yisrael miyat plishtim." V'hu yachel leishias Yisrael miyat plishtim. He's going to start saving the Yidden from the plishtim. So this is where we're holding now. Omer Rabbi Chanina. So he says like this: "V'hu yachel leishias Yisrael." Omer Rabbi Chama Rabbi Chanina. So he says, what does that mean? Huchal shuasei shel Avimelech. That Shimshon's parents were being told that the oath of Avimelech, who was the Melech Plishtim, was now being absolved. It's going to be negated. Diksiv, as it's written in Tishker Li, that when Avimelech made the shvua with Avram, so he said to him, Avimelech said to him in Tishker Li, that you will not deal falsely with me, ulenini ulenechti, or with my son, or with my son's son. So if you remember the pasuk in Bereshis, so he says, Va'ata now Yishavali Belikim, Heina im Tishker Li, ulenini ulenechti kachesed asher asisi imcha tasi imadi, that Avimelech made Avram Avinu swear that he's not going to harm any of his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, that he's not going to touch the Plishtim. So now what the Malach was telling Shimshon's parents is that Shvuah now is Huchal, is basically, like Rashi says, it's batel. That why is it batel? Because since the Plishtim are not keeping up to their side of the deal, so therefore Al Pi Halacha, the Yidden don't have to keep up to their side of the deal. And this is what the Pasuk is saying. It's brought down in Cheshem Mishpat, Shulchan Aruch, that if two people make an agreement and one doesn't keep their side of the deal, the halacha is we learn that the other person doesn't have to keep their side as well. Now, the Pasuk says, in regards to Shimshon, Pasuk says in Sheftim, Vateled ha'isha bein, that the woman had a child, Vatikra Shemai Shimshon, she called him Shimshon, Vayigdal Hanar. It says, and the lad grew, Vayivarcheu Hashem, and Hashem blessed him. So the Gemara says, Bameh berchu. With what did Hashem bless him? Whenever you say a lashon of bracha, it means that he got abundance of something. So the question is, Bameh berchu, with what was Shimshon blessed? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marav. So Rabbi Yehuda Marav says, Sheberchu ba'amosei, that his aver was gebenched, was blessed. Amosei kibnei adam, even though he was very large, he was a giant. His aver was regular. However, v'zarei kinachal sheitif, his seed was overflowing like a river. Then the pasuk says, prior to Shimshon's death, the pasuk says, "Vayikra Shimshon el Hashem." That this is the famous story when right before Shimshon was about to kill himself with 3,000 plishtim. So Shimshon was locked in the stadium over there. And Vayikra Shimshon el Hashem, Shimshon called to Hashem, Vayemer Hashem Aleikim, and he said, Hashem, God, Zachreni no, remember me, V'chaskeni no, and strengthen me, Acha Pam Hazeh, only this one time, V'inokmo Nikam Achas Mishte'ena Miplishtim, and you should also avenge, because the Plishtim, as we know, the Plishtim knocked out, they took out both of Shimshon's eyes. So what Shimshon was saying is for the to take nekama on them, at least one of my eyes, as Rashi explains, that one of the eyes for the schar of knocking out one of the eyes, he deserved elam haba. And one of the eyes, he was asking that Hashem should take revenge for what the Plishtim did to me. So Omar Rav says, Omar Shimshon Lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shimshon said in front of the Eibishter Hazeh, Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the universe, Zechar li Esrim, or Esrim Ushtayim Shana, remember the 20 or 22 years that Sheshafati Es Yisrael, that I judged the Jewish people without receiving any reward. And I didn't even tell, as we know, we're going to learn that Shimshon was limp. He was limp in both of his feet, and he did not ask any of the Yidden. He didn't say to them, move my stick for me from one place to another place. So Shimshon was saying, B'schar, that I was honest and I was straight. And I, as the Mefarshim explain, that it says that Sheichad, bribery, the Maharsha explains, Sheichad, Pasuk says, Ki Sheichad Yaver Nechachom V'Salach Divrei Tzadikim. That Sheichad makes a Sheifet, makes a dying blind. So Shimshon was worried and was telling the Ribono Shel Olam that people could think that the fact that I'm blind now is because I took Sheichad from as a Sheifet. So what does Shimshon say? That remember the 20 years or 22 years that I judged the Yidden, and I did not even say to them, not even a bribery, but I didn't even ask one to move a stick from one place to another place. Other Mefarshim explain is that Shimshon was saying is that the Eibishter, a melech is not allowed to marry Geirus. So he's telling the Eibishter that you would think that I have the din of a melech, and since I have a din of a melech, I was not allowed to marry Geirus. You should tell him that a melech, everybody does their work for the melech. And you should know that I did not conduct myself like a melech. I didn't even move a stick from one place to another place. Okay, then the pasuk says that when Shimshon's wife, when Shimshon's father-in-law betrayed him and Shimshon married a girl from Plishtim, and Shimshon then, his father-in-law took his wife and let him marry another man. So the pasuk says, "Vayelech Shimshon." Shimshon went, "Vayilkod shlosh me'is shu'alim," and he caught 300 foxes. The pasuk says he caught 300 foxes. Vayikach lapidim, vayifen zenev el zonav, vayosem lapid echad min shnei haznavis batovach. The pasuk says that he took 300 foxes, he took torches, and he turned tail to tail and put a torch in the midst between every two tails. And what he did was he burnt down thousands and thousands of miles of property of the Plishtim. So the Gemara asks, Ma'ishna Plishtim, Ma'ishna Shu'alim, what is different about foxes than by any other animal that he chose dafke foxes to burn down the field of the Plishtim? So Omar Rabbi Abu Bar Nagdi, Omar Rabbi Chia Bar Abba, he says, Omar Shimshon said, Yavi mi shechezel acharav, let the animal that goes in reverse when it tries to escape. Most animals, when it escapes, it runs backwards and it flees. The fox, when it escapes, it goes backwards. So he said, let the animal which goes in reverse when it tries to escape be an exact punishment from Plishtim who renege on their oath that Avimelech swore to Avram. Like the Maharsha explains, he dafka took the tails because the tails is like mamish, the back of the animals, showing how the Plishtim don't even keep their word, don't even keep the oath that Avimelech, their king, swore to Avram Avinu. Okay, Tanya was taught in a brayso. Reb Shimon Achasid said, "Ben Kseifav of Shel Shimon Shtayim Amma Hoya," that between the shoulders of Shimshon was 60 amas. Shimshon was very, very tall, based on this brayso, and his shoulders went from 60 amas, which is like each amma is like 4 feet, or 6 feet. Each amma is 6 feet. Could you imagine 6 times 60? Yeah, a lot of Mefarshim say it's a guzma. It's not shy for somebody to be so big and live. But he had tremendous strength, and al pi pshat, his shoulders were 60 amas wide. Shnei, as the pasuk says, "Vayishkav Shimshon al chatzi alayla." It says that Shimshon, when Shimshon was the pasuk says that he went to Aza. Over there was he was having relations with a Plishti woman, and the Plishtim found out about it, and they said that this is going to be their chance now to kill Shimshon. So they didn't know exactly where Shimshon was. So they locked the entire city, and they said in the morning when Shimshon wakes up, we're going to kill him. So the pasuk says that Shimshon found out about this, or Shimshon knew about this, and Shimshon woke up at Chatzi Alayla in the middle. He slept till half of the night. Vayokem b'Chatzi Alayla, he woke up at midnight. Vayechazei b'dalseis shar ha'ir b'shtei hamezuzos vayisoim and habriach vayosem al ksefo. The pasuk says that he grabbed hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the two posts and plucked them up, the bar and all, and put them upon his shoulders. And the pasuk says, and he carried them on top of the mountain that is before Hebron. Now, like the Mefarshim explains, it doesn't just say he carried. It says, "Vayosem al ksefov." He carried them on his shoulders. Why does the pasuk say that he carried them on the shoulders? So this indicates that the width of the gate of the city was equal to the width of Shimshon's shoulders. Ugmiri, and we have a tradition that the ein dalsis azo chuses mishishim amma. We have a tradition that the doors of the gate of Azo were no less than 60 amas wide. So since it says that he carried the gates, he carried the doors of Aza, it must be, if he's able to carry it on the shoulders, it must be that his shoulders were 60 amas wide. Now, with regards to Shimshon's capture, the pasuk says that Shimshon, the Plishtim got a hold of him. The pasuk says, "Vayinakru es einov," and they took out his eyes. Vayiridu oisei azasa vayasu bane chushtayim vayitechem beis asurim. The pasuk says the Plishtim got a hold of him and they put out his eyes and they brought him down to Gaza and they tied him up with brass. And then the pasuk says vayitechem beis asurim, and he was grinding in the prison house. So Rabbi Yochanan says, the pasuk says, doesn't say what he was grinding. Usually in Tanakh, if he's grinding kemach. The pasuk doesn't say what he's grinding. It says vayitechem beis asurim. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Ein tchina eloshen avera." That tchina means that he was doing an avera. V'cheinu emer, you have another pasuk that says, "Iyov titchan la'achar ishti." Let my wife grind onto another man. Malamid. So this teaches us. Vayitechem beis asurim teaches us shkol echad ve'echad hevi la'ishta lebeis asurim kidei shetisabrei menu. That every man brought their wife to the prison in order that she should be impregnated by Shimshon, that she should have children from Shimshon. And like the Al-Sheikh explains, it doesn't mean kipshuta that Shimshon had, it sounds like Shimshon was a very lewd person. And we know Shimshon was a tzaddik. It doesn't mean that kipshuta that the wives were brought to have relations to be impregnated by Shimshon, but rather they wanted to bring, like the Gemara says by Rabbi Yochanan, like a tzaddik, they wanted to have a figure of somebody that they can imagine, b'shas bia, and that they should have strong children. So they brought their wives to Shimshon. Amar Rav Papa says, Hainu da Amri Inshi, this is what people say, Kamei de Shasi Chamra, before a wine drinker, Chamra, bring wine. Kamei da Faika, before somebody who's like a gardener, Gvidya, Duvla, somebody who's a gardener, bring like figs in front of him. So Shimshon, who married Plishtim women, let's bring Plishtim woman while he's in prison because that's what he's accustomed to. Now, another statement that Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan said, Kol hamizaneh, whoever commits adultery, ishtoi mizaneh Allah, his wife also commits adultery. Shenemar, like it says, Im nifta libi al isha al pesareya arafti. The pasuk says in Iyov, if my heart has been enticed onto a woman, and I have lain in wait at my neighbor's door. Iksiv, it says as well, Titchan la'achar ishti v'aleh yichru acherim. Let my wife grind into another man, and may strangers kneel over her. This is what people say, Ihu beikari. It says that the pumpkins are, he is found amongst pumpkins, like a bigger pumpkin. V'itzi bei butzini. And his wife has like zucchinis, smaller pumpkins. In other words, he's involved, she acts the same way that he does. He's involved in his nus, so she as well is also involved in nus. Another thing Rabbi Yochanan says, Shimshon don es Yisrael kavim shabashamayim. Shimshon judged the Jewish people like the Eibishter, like the Father in heaven does. In other words, with complete justice. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, don yadin amai ke'achad. That Don shall judge his people as one. In other words, Don, who was, like Yaakov was saying, Don, Shimshon came from Don, he was judging ke'achad like the Eibishter, who is Echad. Another thing, Rabbi Shloimy says, Shimshon al Shmei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu nikra. Shimshon is called by the name of the Eibishter. Shimshon is one of the names. Shemesh is one of the names of Hashem. Like it says, Ki Shemesh u'mogen Hashem Elokim. Like it says, for Hashem is the sun and the shield. And the Gemara says, based on that, if Shimshon is one of the Eibishter's names, Elamata lo yimoche, if Shimshon is one of the Eibishter's names, so we know that Hashem's name you're not allowed to erase. So based on that, Shimshon, you should not be able to erase the Shimshon's name. So Ella, and what does Rabbi Shloimy say? He says that Shimshon al Shmei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu nikra. Ella, rather, what Rabbi Shloimy means to say is Me'ein Shmei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not that it's Hashem's name, but he's like, it's similar to Hashem's name. In other words, why is Shimshon similar to Hashem? That Ma HaKadosh Baruch Hu Megan al Kol Olam Kulei, just like Hashem protects the entire world, Av Shimshon Megan B'derish al Yisrael, so too Shimshon in his generation protected over all of the Jewish people. Another thing Rabbi Shloimy said, Rabbi Shloimy, Bilam Chiger Beraglei Akas Hayo. Bilam, this is what I alluded to before, Bilam was lame in one of his legs. As it says, that when he was riding on the Chamar, he was riding on a donkey, so we know the famous story that the Chamar saw a malach and was crashing into the wall, didn't want to go straight. So and from that, Bilam, one of his legs became lame. He wasn't unable to walk. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, Vayelach Shef, and he went limping. Now Shimshon, he was lame. He had a hard time walking in both of his legs. Shneimar, as it says, Shefifa Ali Eirach. It says that that he's a snake, Shefifan in the path, just like a snake walks on his belly, can't really walk. So Shefifain is like a double expression of lame. Shefi is Lashon Yachid. Shefifain is Lashon Abim, that he was not able to walk with both of his legs. Okay. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in a Braisa, Chamisha Nivro Me'ein Dugma Shamayla. There were 5 individuals which were created with characteristics which were like Dugma of the Eibishter. In other words, they exemplified and they had tremendous milas in what Hashem gave them. And Kulun Laku Bahen. And they were all stricken that these characteristics that Hashem gave them worked against them. And he says, who were the 5 people? Shimshon B'koichei. Shimshon was glorified in his strength. Shol B'tzavarei. Shol in his neck. Avshalom B'sa'arei. Avshalom in his hair. Tzidkiah was, Hashem gave him beautiful einav, eyes. And Asa Baraglim. And the Gemara is going to learn out, they're going to explain, the Gemara is going to clarify each one. Shimshon B'koichei. Shimshon was stricken by his strength. Diksiv Vayasar Koichem Me'olav. It says that his strength went away from him. As the pasuk says that the Delilah made him sleep upon her knees, and she called for a man, and he had 7 locks of his head shaved off, and she began to hurt him. And then the pasuk says, Vayasar Koichem Me'olav, his strength went from him. Shol B'tzavari, Shol was struck in his neck. Diksiv, as it says, Shol, when the Plishtim were running after Shol, and Shol did not want to be fallen in the hands of the Plishtim, so the pasuk says that Shol took a sword and fell upon it. So, and as the pasuk says, Rashi brings down that famous pasuk by Yigba Mikola Om Mishichmai, and the pasuk Rashi doesn't quote this, but Vamaila, that his neck, Shol was very tall, Shol HaMelech, and his neck was taller than everybody else. So he had an exemplified neck. And he was, eventually, it was used against him. Now, Avshalom B'Sa'orei, Avshalom was stricken in his hair. So the Gemara says, Ki de'be'inon le'meimar le'kamon, as we will explain soon. Ksiv, now, Tzidkiah be'inav, Tzidkiah was struck in his eyes. Ksiv, as the pasuk says, Ves einei Tzidkiah iver, and put out the eyes of Tzidkiah. Okay, Asa Baraglav, Asa was stricken in his feet. The Ksiv, as the pasuk says, it says, but in the time of his old age, he was diseased in his feet. Rabbi Yehuda says, what happened? That what did he have? He had patagra. Patagra in English is gout. But he had terrible gout also in his feet. So now Marzutra tells Rav Nachman, Hechidomi padagra. What is the circumstances of, like, what is gout? So Amalei tells them, Kemachat kipsar achai. This is like a needle inserted into a living flesh. So he asked him, Minoyod. So then the Gemara asked, Minoyod, how did he know what gout is? So the Gemara says, Iked Amri Mechash have a choyish pei. Some people say that he actually suffered from this condition. Iked Amra, other people say, Mirabi Shamalei, that he heard this from his teacher. Iked Amri, and some people say that Shem L'Reya V'Brisa L'Idiyam, as we brought this pasuk, if you remember, in Daf, I believe Daf Gimel, Daf Dalet, about Benazai, that the secrets of Hashem is with him, that fear him, and the pasuk says, Uvrisi L'Idiyam, and his covenant to make them know it. Okay. The other Rava says, for what reason was Asa punished with this punishment of gout by his feet? The Gemara says, because he made Talmidei Chachamim perform forced labor. Anagri is forced labor. Like it says, and the king Asa made a proclamation unto Yehuda, and the pasuk says, and Ein Naki, there was no one exempt. So the Gemara says, my Ein Naki. What does it mean, there was no one exempt? Even a chassan from his chamber and a kala from her canopy, as we know, usually they're exempt from going to war the first year, Shana Rishona. Asa made everybody, side the Talmidei Chachamim, and even a chassan, mechedre, v'kala mechupasei, mamash, right when they got married, he made them part of this forced labor as well. Okay, now back to Shimshon. See, the pasuk says in regards to Shimshon, Vayered Shimshon Timnasa. It says that Shimshon went down to Timnah, and the pasuk says, and he saw a woman in Timnah, the daughters of the Plishtim. And then in another pasuk, it says about Yehuda, Ksiv, Hine Chamich Oila Timnasa. It says the Ma'aser with Yehuda and Tamar, and they told Tamar, behold, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear the sheep. So the Chayra, where is Timnah? How do you get up to Timnah? Is Timnah, do you have to go down to Timnasa, or do you have to go up? Mashma Shimshon had to go down to get to Timnasa. And Yehuda, it's mashma that he went up. So how do you get to Timnah exactly? Timnasa. So Amar Belazar says, Shimshon, what the pasuk is saying is like this. Shimshon is Ganaba, Shimshon who was disgraced in Timnah. So Ksiv Beyirida, the pasuk uses an expression of going down, descent. Yehuda, Shinis Alaba, Yehuda, who was elevated there, eventually, Ksiv Bey Aliyah. So over there, the pasuk uses an expression of ascent. That's one answer. Shmuel Bar Nachmani says, Shtei Timnois Hayu. There were two cities in Timnah. Chada Birida. There were two cities named Timnah. Shtei Chada Birida. One was reached when you descend into a valley, the Chada Ba'aliyah, and one was reached by an ascent. Third answer, the Papa says, Chada Timnah Havi. There was one Timnah. The Asama Hagisirida. So there was one Timnah, and it was located on the slope of a mountain. So when one came from this side, reached it by descent. The Asama Hagisa, and when one came from that side, then Aliyah reached an ascent. Kegoyin, for example, the Gemara presents examples of such cities. Vardoino, Beibara, Veshuka, Deneresh, all these cities, wherever they are. So you could imagine it's on a slope, but when you come in one area, one way, you have to go down. Another way, you have to go up. Okay. Now, we mentioned Tamar. So now the pasuk says that Vateshev b'Pesach Einayim, which means that she sat at the entrance of Einayim. The pasuk says that it says Vayuga the Tamar Lemar. Okay, so sorry. Pasuk says Vatasir b'di almonasim alav v'techas pasif v'tisala v'tesha b'Pesach Einayim. The pasuk says that when Tamar, as we know, Tamar was married to Yehuda's first son, then he died, and the second son, and then he died, and then Yehuda wanted to push her off from marrying. She thought she was a katlanis, so she wanted to push her off. He wanted to push her off from marrying the third son. So she had the status of a yavama. So Tamar, the pasuk says, she put off her she put off her garments of her widowhood, covered herself with her veil, and wrapped herself. And the pasuk says, Vateshev, she wanted to have children from Yehuda. So Vateshev b'Pesach Einayim, she sat at the entrance of Einayim. Omar Rabbi Alexander says, when the pasuk says that she sat at the entrance of Einayim. What does that mean? She sat at the entrance of Einayim. She went and sat at the entrance of the home of Avram Avinu. She went to Avram Avinu's tent. Makim shekol Einayim tzefis l'reisai. It was a place that all eyes hoped to see it. In other words, it was a destination. So she was certain that Yehuda would pass there by Avram Avinu. So Pesach Einayim, what does it mean? Pesach Einayim is Avram Avinu's tent, which all the eyes were over there. It was a destination area. Reb Chanan Amar Rav. Reb Chanan says in the name of Rav, Makim hu sheshmei Einayim. It was a place called Einayim. V'chenu Omer. So too you have this pasuk in Yeshaya. The pasuk says Tapuach ve'Einam. Tapuach is a place, and Einam is a place. Okay, weiter. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani Amar. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani says that, what does it mean? Pesach Einayim. Shenasna Einayim l'dvara. She provided her eyes for her statement. In other words, with her words, she provided an opening for Yehuda to basically solicit her. That's what it means. Shepas Einayim, that she, with her words, she provided an opening for Yehuda to solicit her. Shetava Amar La. So when Yehuda solicited her to engage in relations, so he says that Amar La, he said to her, Shema Nochresat, maybe you are a Goya, you're a Gentile. So Amar Le, she said to him, no, Gerus ani ayame Gerus. So he said, okay, Shema Ishat, maybe you are a married woman. So Amar Le, she said to him, Tamar said to Yehuda, Pnuyani, I am an unmarried woman. Shema Kibo Bach Bich Ovich Kiddushin. So then Yehuda said, perhaps your father accepted Kiddushin for you. So Amar Le, she said, Yusemani, I am an orphan. So then Yehuda said, Shema Tmeat, maybe you are impure. Amar Le Tehirani, I am Tehira. So that's what it means, that Shenasne Naim L'dvarel, that she provided an opening for Yehuda to basically to ask all these questions. Okay, then the pasuk says, famous pasuk, the Gemara discusses about Avram Avinu's house. So it says, Vayita Eshel be'Be'er and he planted an Eshel in Be'er Shava. Then the pasuk says, Vayikra Sham b'Shem Kel Olam. Right? Vayita Eshel be'Be'er Vayikra Sham b'Shem Hashem Kel Olam. So Amar Rish Lakish says, Melamesh Osa Pardes. This teaches us that Avram Avinu made an orchard by his house. But not the bay, and he had all kinds of sweet things. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Nechemia. So the Gemara says, what does it mean, Pardes? So there's a machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nechemia what Pardes means. Chad Amar Pundik. Some people say Pardes. Some people say it was an orchard. But Chad Amar Pundik, it was an inn. So the Gemara says, Bishleim Lamad Amar Pardes. Mele, if you say it's a orchard, Hanidik Sivayita, you planted. So the planting makes a lot of sense. Lamad Amar Pundik, but according to the opinion that holds, it was a inn. What does it mean, Vayita? What does it mean he planted? The pasuk says, Vayita ole apande. The pasuk says, and he shall plant the tents of his place. So we see that when it comes to tents and these things, you can also use the expression of planting. Okay. Fine. So okay. Now the pasuk says, Vayikra Sham b'Shem Hashem Kel Olam. It says that Avram Avinu he called Kel Olam. Sorry. Let me get to the next blot. Okay, the Gemara says, Al Tikri Vayikra Ella Vayakri. Don't say Vayikra that he called Ella. It doesn't say, don't read the Vayikra that he called, but Ella Vayakri, that he made others call. Malamed teaches us, Shehikri Avram Avinu L'Shmei Shal Kadosh Baruch Hu B'Peh Kol Eber V'Shav, that Avram Avinu made other people call whoever passed by. Ketzad how so? Famous Gemara and Medrash. It says that after they ate and drank, Amdu Levarchoy. So they got up and they came to bench Avram Avinu for all the good delicacies that he gave them. So he said to him, he said to them, did you eat my food? You ate Hashem's food. So and they praised to the Rebbeinu Shalom. And then, of course, the Chassidus brings down the famous Medrash that if they didn't want to bless Hashem, then he forced them. He said, either you bless Hashem or we pay up. And there's many sichas of the Rebbe exactly what was the point of forcing a guy to do something that he didn't even really mean. Let's continue. Okay, the Gemara returns now to the Ma'aseh of Yehuda and Tamar. The pasuk says, "Vayir'eha Yehuda vayachsheva l'zayna," that Yehuda saw her and thought that she was a zayna. Why? He kissed paneh, because her face was covered. So the Gemara asks, "Mishum the kissed paneh chashva l'zayna," because her face was covered, he thought that she was a zayna. Adarabah. Your face being covered is something which is very, very good. Why would it's funny because her face was covered? That's why he thought she was a zayna. So Rabbi Elazar says she kissa paneh bebeis chamel, because she used to cover her face in her father-in-law's house. She was very tznius, and because of her tznius, Yehuda didn't recognize her. Now that her veil was off, so Yehuda did not know that it was really his daughter-in-law. Rabbi Shloimy Greenwald, he says, "Kol kala shitznu bebeis chamel." Any kala who is tznius in her father-in-law's house, zeicha v'yeitzim imenu malachim and neviim, will be zeicha to have kings and neviim come out. Minallah, where do we know this from? Tamar. From Tamar's tznius caused in Yehuda's house caused that eventually Peretz and Zarach came from this unison, and they were malachim neviim. Neviim, how do we know that Tamar had neviim? Diksiv Chazon Yeshayahu ben Omitz, and he was from the descendants. And malachim, how do we know that Tamar had malachim, kings from David who came from Tamar? He says, we have a tradition, Omitz, Va'amatzia were brothers. Now the Gemara goes back to the Ma'aseh with Tamar, that when Yehuda thought that Tamar was mezaneh, she was pregnant, and thought that Tamar had relations with another man while she was a Yevama. So it says that the pasuk says that Yehuda wanted to burn her. Then the pasuk says he mutseis. The pasuk says that while she was being taken out, she sent her. The pasuk says Yisholcha l'chameh lemar. She said that the thing in my hand are basically from this person who owns these items. So anoichi hara, I got pregnant, and she said, and she said basically she was alluding to Yehuda that you were the one who impregnated me. So the Gemara says he mutseis. Pasuk says he mutseis. It's mashma like she was taken out to be burned, so she sent her father-in-law Yehuda the collateral. So the Gemara says the word mutseis is mashma is not so clear, because you could say it's like melashon of finding. So the Gemara says he mitutzeis mibayle. Should have said that mitutzeis while she was being taken out. What's his lashon of mitzia? So Rabbi Elazar says la'achar shenimtza simona. It was after the person that the simanim belonged to. So what happened? La'achar shenimtzu simona ba samo v'richkon. That after she brought the ring and the stick, and she was showing Yehuda that this was your collateral for having relations with me, ba samo v'richkon. The malach Samo came and basically distanced the collateral away from her, took the collateral away, not to shame Yehuda. So what happened? Well, Gavriel v'kirvan. So Gavriel came and brought it back. So that's what the pasuk says. He mutseis. This is a lashon of Metzia, that Tamar found her objects that was lost that were lost from her. And Hainu Diksiv. This is what David HaMelech means to say. Lam natzeach hayenas elam rechaykim leDavid michtam. What does it mean that she was like a yoina, a lame dove? On Rabbi Shloimy says that when her simonim were taken away by the malach, nasis kiyeni melech, she became like a dove which is lame. She had nothing to say. She became mute. Because she was going to bring these items as a raya that it was from Yehuda, and now that it was taken away, she had nothing to justify herself. David michtam. Then the pasuk says David michtam. Pasuk says Lama tzech hayenes elam rechaykim David michtam. So the Gemara says David michtam. What does it mean, the David michtam? Sheyatz menu David shayamach. That it's going on Tamar, who had David HaMelech stand from her, who was mach, which means he was humble, the tam, and he was a tamim. Lakoil for everything. Davar ach, another explanation. Michtam. What does michtam mean? Sheisa makosei tama. that he was born with a bris, which means that Shenelad Shumal, he was born with a bris. Davar Acher, what does mean michtam? Shem shebakatnasa hiktan asma etzam misha gadol mimeno. Just like when he was younger, David HaMelech made himself like small in front of people who were greater than him, Lilma Teda, to learn Teda. Kach b'gulase, so too when he was older, he was very, very humble to make himself small in front of other people. So that's what it means. Michtam. Michtam is a lashon of tam makoisei. Okay. Then the pasuk says, the pasuk goes back to Tamar and it says, "V'hi sholcha el chamel leimar." She said this to her father-in-law, saying, "Leish asher elalei aneichi harav." From this lady, she said, from this man I became impregnated. So the Gemara says, "V'tema leimar." Why didn't she just tell Yehuda beferish instead of giving these hints? And from this man I was impregnated, from the person who owns this collateral. Why didn't she say clearly that I became pregnant from you? And behold, here are your simanim. So the Gemara says a very famous thing. Amar Rab Zusha Bar Tuvia Amar Rav, Amar Le Amar Rab Chana Bar Bizna Amar Shimon Chasida, Amar Le Amar Rabbi Yechon Mishum Shimon Yechai. It's better for a person to put themselves in a burning fire. Tamar was ready to sacrifice herself and to kill herself in a burning fire. And don't embarrass your friend publicly. Where do we know this from? From Tamar. Tamar was ready not to save herself by telling her father-in-law that it's really you, then to embarrass Yehuda in public. So from here we see a very famous thing, that it's better. And Tesis asks, if that's really true, that you have to kill yourself not to embarrass somebody, so why is that not part of the dinim of Yarig Val Yaver? You know, there's three things that a person has to kill himself and not be over. And Avodah Zarah. And so based on this, is the fourth one. Why is there no din of Yarig Val Yaver? So Tesis says that only when it says Yarig Val Yaver, it means only things which are mefurish in Torah. So clear din in Torah says clearly that these dinim have to be Yarig Val Yaver. Things which are like the Lashon Tesis, Elavirs, things which are not clear in Torah. So then there's no din of that the Gemara doesn't mention. Okay, other Mefarshim say it doesn't mean kipshuta; it's just more of from the what a person should do, but there's no chiyuv of Yarig Val Yaver over here. Okay, then she says the pasuk says, "Vatoimer hakir no lemiachei semes v'apsilim v'amata ela." Please recognize the one who owns this chaysemes and psilim v'amata. Amar Rabbi Chama Rabbi Chanina. She said like this. When she said hakir, she was saying behakir bisr la'aviv. That with the word hakir, Yehuda told his father on the death of Yosef. He said, right, hakir. He said when he brought the Ksenes Pasim, he said, could you please recognize this? And behakir bisru. And with the words hakir, he was told on his sin. Behakir bisr. With the word hakir, Yehuda told his father, like it says, hakir na Ksenes bin Chayi. When Yehuda wanted to mislead and misinform Yaakov about Yosef's sale. So what did he say? Hakir, no, please recognize, Akshenis bin Chayi, is this your son? And the Gemara says, Bahakir b'suru, and with the word hakir, he also was told about his sin. Like it says, Hakir no lemi achisemes v'apsin v'amata elam. Okay, now the Gemara says, we said hakir no, ein no elaloshin bakasha. When the word no means please. Amar Le and Tamar told Yehuda, I beg of you, hakir pnei beiracha, recognize in front of in other words, don't be too proud, and don't, in other words, that Tamar thought that Yehuda is not going to recognize this simanim. So she said, please know, like the Maharsha explains, please know that Hashem knows the truth, and you should now recognize and stand up for the truth. Ayakir Yehuda v'Yemer, and what did Yehuda say? The pasuk says Yehuda recognized this and said, Tzadka, she's right, Tamar, mimeni, she became pregnant from me. This this is what Reb Chanan Bar Bizna said in the name of Reb Shimon Chasida. Yosef Shekidah Shemayim Baseiser. Yosef, who was Mekadeshim Shemayim, quietly that he did not sin with Eishes Peitifar Zachav Esifla Eis Achas Mishmei Shel Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So it was added one name of Hashem. Like it says, Eides Bi Hoisav Shmei. Like it says, the pasuk says, Eides Bi Hoisav Shmei B'Tzeis Al Eretz Mitzrayim. So it says Yosef with an extra hey. So he had it because he was Mekadesh, the Eibusher's name, B'Seiser, so Hashem gave him an extra letter of his name. Yehuda Shekim Shemayim, Shekidah Shem Shemayim for Hesed. Yehuda was Mekadesh Shem Shemayim Barabim. Zachav Nigra Kula Al Shmei Shel Hakadosh Baruch Hu. He was called, as we know, the Yud Kei Vav Kei is in Yehuda's name. Yehuda has Yud Kei Vav Kei. So Gemara says, Kivin Shahidav Amar Tzadka Mimeni. Once Yehuda said the word Tzadka Mimeni Yatsa Baskal V'Amra. So a Baskal came out, a heavenly voice came out and said, Ati Tzalta Tamar Shnei Banam Naor. You saved Tamar and her two children from the fire. Chayecha, I swear, Shani Matzah B'Schuscha Shloishim Benachem Naor. I'm going to save 3 of your children eventually from fire. Mani, who were these? The famous story of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, as we know in the story over there that they were thrown into the fiery pit, and what happened was Nebuchadnezzar put them into like a fiery pit, and over there the Navi says how he lit up the pit. It was so hot that it was like because they didn't want to bow down to the Avodah Zarah, so they were thrown into a pit of very, very, very fiery pit, very hot pit. It was like insanely hot, and nothing happened to them. Why didn't anything happen to them? Because of the schus that Yehuda did not allow, because he said Tzadka Mimeni, and didn't allow Tamar and his children to burn. So Mida Keneged Mida, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were saved. Tzadka Mimeni. Now Yehuda said Tzadka Mimeni. So the Gemara says Mina Yada. How did Yehuda know that it was from him? Maybe Tamar had relations with other men. So the Gemara says Yatsa Baskol. V'Amra Baskol went on and said Mimeni Yatsu Kvushim. That the heavenly voice came out and said these words. Now, V'Layosef Eila Daita. So it says that the words, it says V'Layosef Eila Daita. So Omar Shmuel Sava Chamud Rav Shmuel Bar Ami Mishmei Rav Shmuel Bar Ami Kivan Shiada. Once Yehuda knew that Shemei L'Shem Shemayim Shuv Le'Pasuk, he did not go away from her. It says V'Layosef Eila Daita. It says V'Mantera Koygodav L'Yosef. So I learned, just like L'Yosef means it didn't stop, so to L'Yosef over here means that Yehuda continued to be married to her. Now the Gemara goes back on this whole idea of Mida Keneged Mida. It says Avshalom Nizgo B'Sa'ari, that Avshalom bragged about his hair. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in Abraisa Avshalom B'Sa'ari Marat, that Avshalom, he rebelled with his hair. Shnei, like it says of Avshalom, that Avshalom was, the pasuk says in Shmuel, that Avshalom was, there was nobody more handsome than Avshalom. And the pasuk says, he didn't have any blemish whatsoever. He would shave his hair. As we know, Avshalom was an Azar Olam, and he would shave his hair once a year. And the shakal sardoshim asayim shkalim be'evan hamelech, his hair weighed 200 shkalim with the weight of the king. Okay, Tana, we learned in Abraisa, Evan Shan Shitfer Yavan Shitzepedim Sheiklum Ba. The figure, therefore, the pasuk says Nitla B'Sari. He was hung because he bragged about his hair. He was hung with his hair. Shneim, like it says, Vayikra Avshalom Lefnei Avdei David, and Avshalom was called before Avdei David. Avshalom Reichev Al Aperet Vayavi Aperet Tachas Soive Chayela Agdela Vayechasek. The pasuk says that when Avshalom was riding on the donkey, so the donkey, his hair got stuck when he was on the parrot. It got stuck his hair got stuck on the tree, and then what happened was a shakla safsavara by the mifsike. He took a sword and he wanted to chop off his hair in order to become untangled. By that time, he saw under him the grave. He saw the gates of Gehenna open up, and he didn't want to go there, so he got stuck, and he basically couldn't do anything. Then the pasuk says, "Vayirgaz Hamelach Vayal al Alias Ashar Vayef." That when David HaMelech found out that Avshalom is what happened to his son Avshalom, so it says that he trembled. Vayal Alias Ashar. He went up to the top of the gate and he cried. He said like this: "B'ni Avshalom, B'ni Avshalom, miyitin musi ani tachtecha." I should have died in your place. Avshalom, B'ni Avshalom, la'at es panav. And I'm sorry, V'amelech la'at es panav. The Melech wrapped his face. Vayizak Hamelech gadol kol gadol b'ni Avshalom b'ni. Now, if you count, how many times did he say b'ni? Hani temanya b'ni lama. Why did he say the words b'ni on Avshalom 8 times? So the Gemara says Shiva da'aske, 7 times to take Mishiva Madurigan and take out Avshalom from the 7 gates of Gehenim. V'idach, and the other one, the 8th time, Ikad Amri the Karv Reish Lagabigo, for either to bring his head and his body back together, Ikad Amri the Aisel Omudasi, or some people say to bring him to Oilam Haba. Okay, then the Pasuk says that Avshalom made a matzeva, he made a monument. Avshalom Lakach, it says Avshalom went, Ayatzev leBechayav, and he made a monument for himself in his life. So the Gemara says, "My Lakach." What does it mean? He took that he made a bad purchase. He made a bad purchase in trying to become the king. Okay, es matzevas asher be'emek hamelech. Omer Rab Chanina bar Papa. What does this mean? Be'etza amuka shel malka shel olam. That the Eibishter was grazed on David HaMelech because of the Ma'isa Batsheva, that he was grazed that Avshalom should rebel against him. The Ksiv, like it says, "Hinei mekim alecha ra mi beisach." Yeitza b'davar ato emer, v'yishachem me'em mechevra. Omer Rab Chanina bar Papa. We find be'etza amuka shel eset tzaddik, that emek means that the advice of the tzaddik should cover b'chevra. The Ksiv yodei ateda kiger yezaracha. Okay, so we're gonna do. I'm gonna try something new now over here. Let's see, just to do a quick shot of Darei Chazara. Just quickly, so we have just the block clear. Okay, we started off today with the pasuk of that Shimshon's mother was told, his parents were told, that he's going to start to save Klal Yisrael. So Rav Chanina said, what Yachal means is that the shvua that Avram Avinu made with Avimelech, that's going to be now batal. Then the pasuk says, "Vayigdal anar vayivarcheu." What does it mean that Hashem blessed Shimshon? So it says that that his aver was a regular aver, but he had a lot of seed to make a lot of children. Vayikra Shimshon el Hashem. So Shimshon called Hashem and said, "Please, this time remember me and take revenge of one of my eyes." So what Shimshon was saying is that remember the 22 years that I judged Klal Yisrael, and I did not even take anything. I didn't even ask Klal Yisrael to take a makel from one place to another place. And like we said from the Marsha, that taking bribes is Yaver Nechachamim, and he says that people will think that I took bribes, and that's why my eyes are like this. So please take that rumor away. Then the pasuk says that Shimshon got upset and he took Shalosh Mei Shu'alim. So the Gemara asks, why Shu'alim? She says, because just like Shu'alim, when they run away, they run backwards, so too, he was alluding to them that the Plishtim basically go back from their Shua. Tanya, we learned in a Brisa that Shimon Chazet said that the Kseifa, the shoulders of Shimshon, were 60 amas wide. Like it says that Shimshon got up in the middle of the night and he took out the doors, and we know the doors were 60 amas. Then it says that Vayitechem Beis Asurim, that he was grinding in the Beis Asurim. Rabbi Yechlan says Tchina means Avera. Like it says Titcha Nachar Ishti, that teaches us that every woman every husband brought their wife to Shimshon to have children from him. And this is what it means, that in front of a person who drinks wine, give them wine. In front of a person who eats a gardener who eats gourds, give them gourds. And Shimshon, who was accustomed with women, Plishti women, bring him Plishti women. Then in Reichem it says anybody who's mezana against his wife also is mezana. This is what it means, that the man has the big pumpkins and the woman has the small ones. Yechlan says that Shimshon was judged the Yidden mamash like the Eibishter. Rabbi Yechlan, Shimshon had the Eibishter's name. Like it says, Shemesh u'magen Hashem Elikim, that we see that Shimshon is Melashon Shemesh. So the Gemara says, if so, you should not erase Shemesh name. So the Gemara says, it doesn't mean mamash Hashem's name, but me'ena HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Just like Hashem protects the world, Shimshon protected his generation. Another thing, that Bilam was lame in one of his feet, and Shimshon was lame in both of his feet. Like I said, Shififiyan is Melashon Rabim. 5 people, the Brisa says, had tremendous milas over other people in this one thing, and it was used against them. Shimshon with his kayach, Shaul with his neck, Avshalom with his hair, Tzidkiyahu with his eyes, and also with his feet. Shimshon with his strength, like it says, V'yasar koichem olav. Shimon, Shaul, with his neck, like it says that Shaul took the sword and put it in his neck. Avshalom with his hair, and Tzidkiyahu with his eyes, like it says, V'as'enei Tzidkiyahu iver, he was blind, and also with his feet, like we know he had, like Rabbi Yehuda Amar says that he had gout. What's gout? So he says, Kamachat basar achai, like a needle going to live skin. How did he know this? The Gemara says a few answers. Either he heard it from his either he himself had it, he heard it from his Rebbe, or Sheda Hashem Lidei of Vrisa Leidiyam. Darash Rava, why did Asa get gout? Because he made Talmidei Chachamim work forced labor. And not only that, the Gemara says, Einaki, that he made even a chas and meched bechalim chupasei work. Then the Gemara brought a steer. One pasuk says, Vayer Shimshon Timnasa. Shimshon went down from Timnah, and then it says that Tamar went up to Timnasa to see Yehuda. So, why is Timnah up or down? So Rabbi Lazar says Shimshon, who was degraded over there, uses the lashon of Yerida. Yehuda, who was Nisal over there, uses the lashon of up. Shmuel Bar Nachmani says there was really 2 Timnahs. One was down and one was up. There was 2 places called Timnah. One you had to go was Yerida. One was an Aliyah. The Papa says it was really one place and one slope, but from one side you had to go up and one side you had to go down. And the Gemara brought a few examples of cities that are like this. Then the Pasuk says that she was sitting by Pesach Einayim. So Rabbi Chazandi says, what does it mean by Pesach Einayim? It teaches us that she went to sit by the Pesach of Avram Avinu, that everyone is over there, and she hoped that Yehuda would see her. Rabbi Chanan says, Amar Rav says it was a place called Einayim, but Tapuach ve'Einam. Shmuel Rachmani says that it means that she sat in a place, Pesach Einayim, that gave a Pesach for Yehuda to start speaking. When Yehuda saw her and wanted to have relations, he asked her, are you a Nachris, are you a Giyodis? And she said, no, I'm not all these things. Then the Pasuk says, Vayita Eshel b'Be'er Shava. Rish Lakish says it was a Pardes. It was a Pardes. So that Avram Avinu planted a Pardes, and he planted all these Minei Megadim. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda and Nechemia have an argument. One says it was an actual orchard, one says it was a inn. So the Bishleim and the Mandamur says it was a Pardes. That's what it means he planted. But what does it mean that he planted a inn? So the Gemara says, I find an expression of planting also by hosting, Vayita Olei Apande. Then it says, Vayikra b'Shem Hashem Kel Olam. So he says, don't mean that he made call, but rather he made others call. That anybody who passed by Avram Avinu, he made them call and bench Hashem for giving them the food, and they benched Avram Avinu. So he said, Mishaliach Chaltam, I ate from you. So he says, so Avram Avinu says, you ate my food, you ate Hashem's food. So the Gemara says, then the Pasuk says that Yehuda saw her and thought that she was a Zaina. Why? Because she covered herself. So the Gemara says, because she covered herself, that's why she thought he was a Zaina. He thought that she was a Zaina. So Rabbi Elazar says that she really covered her face in her father-in-law's house, Mitzatznias. And Yehuda didn't recognize her because she was always covered. That any kala who's tsanua b'beis chamel in her father-in-law's house is zeichet to have malachim and nevim, and the Gemara brought a raya from Chazon Yishayahu, and she had David also, which was a melech that stemmed from her. And the Gemara says he mutzeis. The Gemara says, why are you saying he mutzeis malachim mitzvah? Say he mutzeis. So Amar Lazar that after she found the simanim, Samol, the malach came and pushed it away from her. Gabriel came back and brought it back, and this is what it means. Lam natzer yenes elam rechaykim. The David Michtam, that when her Simanim went away from her, she became like a dove which is mute. The David Michtam, and then David came out from her, who was Michtam, Mach V'tam, or that he was Neilad Mol, or Michtam, that just like the Katnusai, he made himself small to people who were greater than him. Also, when he was older and learning, he made himself small to other people. Then it says, V'hi shilchal chamel lemer le'isha she'ila le'anechi hara. So the Gemara says, why not say it clearly? So he says, because, famous thing, It's better to go into a fiery furnace than to jump and to go and embarrass somebody. And then we brought from Taisvis, why is that not one of the mitzvahs of Yarig Bal Yavris? He says because it's not beferish in the pasuk. And the Gemara says, Hakir na. What's the solution of Hakir na? So Rabbi Shloimy bar Rabbi Chanina says that with Hakir, with the word Hakir, he was mavasir to his father about Yosef's supposed murder, and by Hakir he was told that it was really from him. Now, na is lashon bakasha. So she said, "Please don't be proud and save me from this burning." Now, what does it mean? Then what does it say? It says, "Vayakar Yehuda v'yemer tzotka mimeni." Now it says that Yosef was mekadeshim Shemayim Maasis. He only had one name, one letter added to his name of Hashem. Like it says, "Edis behesu," the extra hey. Yehuda, who was mekadeshim Shemayim Farhesia, the whole name of Hashem Yudke Vavke is in Yehuda. Now, once she said Tzotka Mimeni, Yotze Baskel said that since you saved Tamar and her two children, Chayach, I promise that I'm going to save your three children of Mishol, Hanani, and Azariah. Tzotka Mimeni, so the Gemara says, how did Yehuda know that it was Taka from him? So the Gemara says it was a Baskel. But Yosef Eila Daita, so the Gemara says is that what it means that Yosef Eila Daita, that he did not, he continued being married to her. Tarabanan, Avshalom. So then we brought Avshalom bragged with his hair. So the Gemara says, what does it mean he bragged? Since he bragged with his hair, he was so with his hair he also was murdered. Tana Evan Shanchi Tveri Ranchi Spur Shekel was they waited and it was 200 with Shekel HaMelech. And that's why, because he bragged about his hair, that's why he was hung with his hair. As we know that his hair was caught in the tree, and he saw Sheil Tachtis. He didn't want to go there, so he was basically stuck, and he could not. He didn't want to cut off his hair to go there, and that's how he died. Tana de Rabbi Shmuel. Okay, we just said that. Vayagas Amelech Vayal. He cried, and the Gemara asked, why did he say 8 times the word beneath? So the Gemara says either 7 times to take him from Madura Gehenna, and the 8th time to bring him his head and his body together, or to bring him to Eilam Haba. Then we said Avshalom Lokach V'Yatzav LeBechayev. So it says, what does it mean? Vayikach or Lokach is that he made a bad purchase. Okay, we'll continue Mitzvah tonight from here.